This is the OverReaction podcast.
Greg,
Hey, Jeremy.
welcome to the OverReaction podcast.
I love the name of that podcast, by the way. It's just perfect.
Yeah, we hope. Like everything in healthcare is either an underreaction or a bland oatmeal reaction. I'm like, come on, let's do what we do in other industries, which is let's just talk, man. Let's have some hyperbole. Let's have some energy. Let's have some real opinions, rather than everyone playing it safe, or they sound like it's every acronym and MBA program soundbite kind of thing. So
yeah, I'm with you.
So how you been?
I'm good.
What's up?
Good. Thanks for having me. A lot going on. I think it's it's a busy time in healthcare, and depending upon which segment of especially the HIT market, depending on which segment of the market you're in, it's either hot or just really stale. And obviously the hotness stuff is more around data and AI and analytics and things like that. So it's an exciting time. I'm really optimistic.
So then what's stale?
EHRs, really stale. I think when I say stale, I think I'm more coming from the perspective of what's getting funded, not just in terms of companies, but also what's getting bought. And I think the healthcare industry or the HIT industry right now, well, I say healthcare broadly, and I'm going to stick to the provider side. I think we're in this mode of we've got sort of two personas. We've got those that are really afraid, real fear about the adoption of AI, for example. And then you have the other group, which is FOMO. And everybody knows it's here, it's coming. Now I'm going to have to deal with it. I want to get on that gravy train, but I'm not sure exactly how. I'm like just taking that first step. And so, I think, I've talked about this before, that a lot of times in healthcare, people, when they hear AI, they immediately jump to the most complicated use case ever, which is, being better than a doctor, as an example. Right. And
there's some sort of fear interchange with that irrational mindset, right?
Yeah. And so I think what people miss is they miss that there's so much low-hanging fruit administratively in healthcare, to which AI is absolutely 100% uniquely designed to do or to solve for. And so instead of thinking about, in my mind, this is how I think about it, instead of trying to jump to the end point, right, the ultimate, implementation of AI, start small. Start with the things customer experience, patient experience, a lot of administrative functions around coding and billing and things that we do at Carta Healthcare, like chart abstraction.
Well, before we get too far into that kind of stuff, how'd you get to this point? Let's talk about your background. Like, how'd you get into healthcare? How'd you get into health tech?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't a plan. It was never a plan to be in the healthcare IT business for almost 40 years. I actually have a degree in ski industry management and a degree in agronomics, but I grew up ski racing. My plan was to stay in the ski business in some way. And the year that I graduated from college, which was 1985, was a terrible snow year. And when that happens in the outdoor sports business, there aren't a whole lot of jobs to be had, especially in the ski business. And so I had to go find a job. I was broke, graduating from college, I was broke, had student loans to pay. And so I, first went to New York. And
so you didn't go out and start protesting everywhere? Because that's what I'm seeing now.
Not yet.
That seems to be a full-time job.
Exactly. No, I went to New York and ended up getting job offers in Manhattan, on Wall Street. But I'm a kid that grew up in way upstate New York and went to college in Maine. And I could just not see me in the concrete jungle of Manhattan.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, okay, what's my next option? What's closer to snow and mountains? And Boston was kind of next on the radar because I grew up in the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
And so I simply asked my dad, I said, Dad, do you know anybody in Boston that I can network with? And he was like, yeah, do you remember this guy named Bob Rako? And Bob was the chief information officer at Tufts Medical Center. And he happened to be my dad's best friend. He actually worked with my dad in another industry. But Tufts had brought Bob in to apply more, I'd say, other industry rigor to the technology and the operations function within IT. And so I called up Bob. I was like, hey, Bob, I'm thinking about moving to Boston. Do you have an hour to get together with me and just give me the lay of the land? He was like, absolutely, come on up and we'll have lunch. And so this is like right now in 1985. And so I went to Boston, I had lunch with Bob. And during lunch, he told me about the decision support platform that they were building for Tufts New England Medical Center. And that there was some external commercial interest in what had been developed. And, and it was an interesting time in healthcare because this was right, 1985 was when DRGs came out. And so you had, provider organizations, in particular hospitals, they're going from a fee for cost plus environment to a fixed payment model for roughly 50% of their cases, right? DRG, or a fixed payment amount. And so it was a time of change in the industry. And anyway, at the end of the lunch, Bob said, "Now keep in mind, I knew nothing about healthcare and I knew nothing about IT. Right? I went through college with a typewriter." And he said, Bob said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "Doing what?" And he said, "I don't know, we'll figure it out." And that's kind of how I wound up, in my career in healthcare IT. And my first day on the job, I was down in the computer room with, big water-cooled IBM mainframes, and I was loading punch cards into IBM mainframes. That's where I started, and mounting tapes in the racks for backups and stuff like that. So I got to learn it really, from the ground up, from the IT side too, operationally. But I think the most brilliant thing that Bob did for me as I'm coming into healthcare, not knowing anything, was that he initially handed me a clipboard and a stopwatch. And he parked me in nursing stations up on the med surg floors. And he had me write down, in a pencil, not a pen, he had me write down every supply that was used, every type of labor, how long it was taking. So I was doing time and motion studies and bill of materials explosions to come up with what the overall cost was for delivering care. And in conjunction with that, what happened, he also had me go on rounds with, docs and nurses. And so I got to sort of I got to learn the operational aspects of care delivery, but more importantly, I fell in love with the compassion of docs and nurses in caring for patients. And that's kind of how I got stuck in this industry. I shouldn't say stuck, it's been a wonderful career. I
prefer trapped.
That's why I moved to Utah. So I wouldn't be as trapped. But yeah, that's how I got into business. And, that experience actually at TSI if everybody could have that kind of experience right out of school, and I was there for almost 15 years, and then we got acquired by Eclipsys, and then we went public in '96, got acquired by Eclipsys, then Allscripts, and a lot of people have lost sight of the story. But it's still, what's interesting to me as I think about the evolution of technology in healthcare is that to this day, nobody has been able to replicate the power and the functionality of what TSI was all about. Interestingly enough, yeah. There's bits and pieces. There's companies that nibble at the edges, but nobody hit the whole thing. And so it was a wonderful experience. It was a very family-oriented environment, throughout the time that we were there. And yeah, it was a great experience.
That's cool, man. So that's good experience. What's been maybe a crazy experience, or one that wasn't so positive? Maybe you learned a ton.
Well, I did have one experience where I would say, I was coming in as chief growth officer, and that's been most of my career, right? Sales and marketing leadership. And I think I trusted too much in that I believed what I had been told by the board and others about the state of the business. And then once I got in, I was 2 weeks in, and I realized that I was sold a bill of goods. And so, that was a short stint in my.
I remember that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I think we were working together actually during that time.
Yeah, I remember that was.
Yeah, so that wasn't so great. But I think by and large, I've been really fortunate. And I even go back to my TSI days that there's a lot of us that some have started to retire. But there's a lot of us that are still super, super connected. And we've worked together in multiple companies. And, one of those people is Brent Dover, who's the CEO of Carta Healthcare. And, Brent was president of Health Catalyst. He was CEO of Medicity. CEO of Park City Solutions before that. And but Brent was on my sales team back in 1996 or 97 when I was at TSI.
Oh,
And
wow.
we became friends and such, and just always stayed in touch, even after I had left in '99. And I've had I've been really blessed to be able to work for Brent in 4 different companies now. No, this is company number 3 formally.
Yeah.
And he's just a wonderful leader and inspiration, and has been my mentor personally, professionally for a long time. And so I've just been really fortunate to have people like that in my life and my career, that believed in me. I believe in them, and it's a harmonious relationship. And we do good stuff together as a result. That's the fun part.
Yeah, he's good people, man. I like Brent.
Good man. Brent, if you're listening to this, now you owe me a raise.
I'll wipe that nose off a little bit. Yeah, I'm saying. So did you get much skiing done? We had 2 pretty epic snow years, man, here in the West.
We got 2 really good years. I think this one was sneaky.
It was.
It started late. It started slow, then it didn't really get going until January sometime, but then it kept coming and coming and coming. So yeah, what will happen next year, though. We'll be in this drought. And fortunately, our reservoirs are full, right? That's
totally full.
Super important.
Yeah. People who don't know, Utah, we're kind of dependent on snow melt.
Yep.
So you were talking, I got us distracted because you were going down a kind of a cool path on, what's good and exciting versus what's old and stale. And EHRs are pretty stale. I was on the phone with somebody yesterday a couple of days ago. That was extolling the virtues of Oracle in the future. Like they're going to really get the EHR 2.0 or, whatever that is. And I got some feedback from somebody else is, EHRs need to just go away. Like over the next 10 years, they just need to go away, right? We need to have all these different digital health apps and, the best for each physician or clinician or people in the business office, whatever, is get away from these giant monoliths, right?
Sure.
And then this morning, a buddy of mine sent me this. I don't know if you saw this blog article. It came from Oracle.
I haven't, not yet anyway.
Dude. Here, I'm gonna send it to you right now.
Where did it appear?
It's from Executive Vice President at I think his name's Ken Gluick.
Oh, at Oracle.
Yeah, do you know Ken Gluick?
I don't know him.
But you know the name.
I know the name.
Hang on, I'm gonna text you right now. You can pull it up maybe I should have sent to you before we got on, but dude, he goes off. Like it is it's not a normal kind of it's almost like Jonathan Bush on a bad day. Remember back in the day, Jonathan, he didn't pull any punches. This Ken guy, man, he really goes after it. So he's executive vice president. He's been at Oracle, I think, for like 25 years. So he's got to be, if he's not second from the throne, he's 3rd or 4th in line to the throne. You know what I mean?
I do like the title of this. Thankfully, Business Insider is not responsible for healthcare modernization.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Business Insider, I don't. They're more like TMZ than anything. They come out with some of the nuttiest, least researched articles I've ever seen. It's all clickbait, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so this guy, he goes in, and he's throwing haymakers at Epic, like left and right. He even threw a little one at Amazon, which I don't understand. He's going after interoperability and the VA, just lots of stuff. So
is the gist, something to the effect of don't count us out because we're going to be
100%. He's like, we're doing way better at the VA than reports say we are. Something they've done with the Department of Defense, I guess, it's a big success, and they're rolling out a clinical digital assistant. So they're just going, and I hope they're successful, right? Because you can't just have Epic. Like, it's not good to have one giant monolith.
It's not.
And we're seeing the same thing.
It stifles innovation.
100% it does.
Yeah.
So so that's what I want your take on, like current state of EHRs, and then where do you think healthcare is going to be in 10 years, and And then where do you think it needs to be?
Yeah, I think I have a few different thoughts on that. One is, I for years I've been waiting for, the billionaires in Silicon Valley to just pony up one of their $1 billion, just one of their $1 billion, and create a modern EHR on modern technology with modern user interfaces and all that kind of stuff. I've been waiting for this for years, and I don't really know why it hasn't happened. I mean, Larry Ellison obviously is a mini billionaire, and he put his money where his mouth is in acquiring Cerner. And of course, there's been a lot of Cerner's been losing a lot of hospitals. That class report came out recently with how many Epic added, how many Cerner lost, that kind of thing. And I look at that and I say that's not good. It's not good because forget the business side of either Epic or Cerner. And of course, there's Meditech and there's lots of other specialty EHRs and so on. But I worry that if and what's the tipping point at which where Cerner customers are bailing out and going to Epic? When do we get to the point where it is a true monopoly? How many more hospitals do we have till Epic is a true monopoly? And what concerns me is I don't know if anybody at the federal government has thought about this, is looking at this, but I would. And when you think about how Epic of all the EHR companies really exploded during the 2010 to 15 era, by federal government money, I would think that somebody in the federal government and the SEC would take a look at this and realize that it's not a good thing.
Yeah, I think we kind of alluded to this in past conversations and some of the other podcasts, but I think the government will, because there's too much spend and too much focus in healthcare. And they talk about data is the new oil, and software is eating hardware for breakfast and all that other kind of stuff, right? So data, and you go through and you ask questions like, okay, you put in the EHR, whether it's Epic or somebody else. And I've done lots and lots of calls, hundreds of conversations over the last 10 years with executive hospitals. And when I ask, okay, you got your EHR, and you would just, it's just a talking point. And then I talk about where are they from a financial standpoint? And then where are they from a staffing standpoint, physician, nurse satisfaction in their jobs? And then where are they from, so it's kind of there's the financial outcome, there's the staff outcomes, and then there's the patient outcomes. And they can't tie any improved outcomes to they put in EHR. And it didn't matter who they put in.
Yep.
Whether it's Epic or something else. And so then my question is, okay, well, then what's the benefit? And what they all say is, well, we have access to the data now. It's digitized. And I said, that's really expensive on a lot of costs associated with now you have digital access to the information now digitized. So my question to you is, coming from this, and I have my own thoughts on, we'll get back into like innovate, the siphoning of innovation, and how that actually happens when you have more monopolistic or even duopolistic paradigms. Is I'm of the mind that meaningful use, the way they did it, isn't a net positive. That isn't to say that is not a net positive. Because I remember back in the day making calls when I was at class, right? So I joined class, and I don't know, 8 or 9 people or whatever, little tiny office condo, and I got hired to grow them up. And I think I did an okay job doing that. But during those calls in my early days, I was calling in customers that had eclipses, hospitals that had eclipses. I'd call in ones that had Envision, one that had IDX, right? They were implementing. It wasn't like it wasn't happening.
Sure.
So when you start looking back in retrospect, meaningful use came out, high-tech legislation, and then it's like, were the hospitals pushing for it at the time? Did the hospitals and clinics say, we need government intervention because there's not enough tech, we need this thing? I don't remember it. Maybe I'm I don't remember that
think so.
happening. It was industry doing it.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been very different if it was primarily all hospital executives, clinic leadership, et cetera, saying, hey, we need to get this digital. We need some incentive to do it. And then it would have been up to them, like, here's what happened, rather than it happened to mapping to a couple EHR vendors, how they did things or how they saw things should happen, right? And then I think there's a lot of defense going on over who you pick. The same reason is, like, we defend our kids when we really shouldn't. Like, the principal's like, your kid's a brat, and we're like, oh, how dare you, whatever. And if you really thought about, like, yeah, my kid's being a bit of a brat, I probably shouldn't. There's a lot of defense mechanisms going on. So I look at and say, what would have it been like now if there was no meaningful use, if industry just went along and they were forced to develop the products to exactly what the market wanted with no outside intervention?
Yeah, I think, having been knee deep in all that, going back to probably 2008, I guess, 2006 even. I think Obama had great vision, and I applaud him for pushing to digitize healthcare, because the paper chart thing, everybody knows, right? And data is a competitive advantage, and it's a necessary foundational element in national security, even from a healthcare perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do applaud all that. I know that during the era of the High-Tech Act and meaningful use and all that, and all the hospitals were trying to get certified, and all the practices were trying to get certified, I had countless conversations with CIOs that said, well, we have to adopt Brand X EHR, and my CEO told me to not leave a single dime of that meaningful use money on the table.
Yeah.
And so the focus was, there was a lot of focus on money, right? There was a lot of focus on getting that certification, getting it implemented. But to your point, there's two things I would say. One is, there's lots of studies many studies that have proven you can't tie improvement of outcomes to the capture of the data. It has made clinicians' lives more miserable. We know that. And so when you made a comment about the EHR needs to go away, and I'll dovetail that with my comment about I'm waiting for some billionaire in Silicon Valley to create the next gen EHR. I think that's the wrong. I think, as I said that, it's the wrong way to think about it. When you think about what is it we really want, what's the end game? We want the data. We want the digital information about patient care. That's what we want. Fortunately, now, there are lots of ways to get digital data without having to point and click around the EHR. And, when you take ambient listening, right? Being able to, create, digitized data from things like that. Take a look at what we do, right? And when you think about, we're in the business of AI-powered clinical data abstraction for building registries. And every hospital in the country most of them participate in some form of registries. And what we do is, we no longer, the technology has advanced so much that we no longer have to do ETL to get data into, all the manual mapping you used to have to do and all that. No, what we do is we just get fire feeds, dump it into a big pile, and then apply the AI to it, and it sorts it all out. And it does it at a fraction of a penny, and it does it like this. And that's cool. And that's a great advancement. And when you trickle that down the line, what does that mean? It means that you don't have to spend as much money. It can be done faster, better, and cheaper. Really, that's kind of I think that's fundamental, basic, right? And so whether it's companies like us, or it's Nuance or anybody else that is sort of digitizing data in different ways other than just the EHR, I think that will be the future.
Well, and so think about value-based care and what turned to population health management, et cetera. What's the goal, right? It's like, we're trying to have people as healthy as possible. And if you have these outcomes, your quality measures for your patients, right? That should be the goal, is X. The difference between you keep the quality high and you're able to keep the cost down here, you keep the difference, right? Now, it's clunky, and I've simplified the living heck out of, because anything the government does is never simple, but that's the goal, right?
Yep.
But like the EHR payment, there was an inverse relationship between the expense and the outcome. So you can come in with Carta and you can show some substantial ROI and improvement to an organization, right?
Quickly.
Well, but look, how hard do you have to scratch and claw?
Yeah.
So you see the difference, right? There's these hospitals are spending hundreds of millions on giant monoliths that they can tie zero negative ROI to, for the most part. And then you have all these companies like you and like Verisma and Baby Scripts and others out there I talk about that have awesome ROI, but they're having to fight and scratch and claw and try to justify their existence. And so like, that's a problem with innovative solutions being adopted. And why is it? Because there's a gigantic gravity well that's sucking away opportunity cost of financial resources, internal staff resources, but then also just mind share. Like they can't dedicate the mental energy to be thinking about anything else.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with, like in other industries, thankfully, you don't have this mega monolith that basically comes, and I've said it before, some of these monolith EHR vendors, they're kind of the de facto default CIO in a hospital. They're kind of the shadow CIO. And innovation can only move at the pace that monolith EHR will allow that hospital to move at.
It's a great
because of that opportunity cost and the deep gravity well that they create within an organization.
Yeah, and a practical level, what happens with vendors like us and lots of other vendors that are out there that are non-EHR vendors is the default for an organization is if they have Epic, they're going to wait for Epic to build whatever it is that we do, as an example, which they probably won't. But vendors like us get stalled in the marketplace because you have all these health systems sitting on the sidelines waiting for Epic to do something. Not as much with Cerner, but definitely with Epic. That is a very common theme in virtually any Epic hospital that you talk to.
And that's where that's when some antitrust scrutiny could come at them, because if they can start to prove, a lot of vendors are like, hey, we're just being literally blocked. We're like back in the 90s with Microsoft, right? Where it's all these other browsers, et cetera. We're saying, hey, Microsoft won't put us on, or you're charging extra. They're blocking this kind of stuff. Government came and said, you can't do that. The internet is the new gateway to information and applications, et cetera. And you dominate the desktop and the laptops, and that's the way everyone accesses it. You can't do that. Right. So if Epic starts becoming like a big operating system, and if they don't ensure that they are not going to block at all, any way, shape, or form, they're going to adopt real interoperability. And if somebody wants to go with Carta or something else, they're literally not going to stand in the way. Contractually, architecturally, right? They just won't stand in the way. Because then I think Epic can continue to grow. Then if every hospital had Epic's operating system, so to speak, but Epic did not choose winners and losers, didn't block, didn't keep coming up with competing products everywhere, they're heading down that path of, it's an interesting combination of them being Windows in the 90s, the Apple App Store, Google App Store, and kind of the Amazon marketplace. They're kind of bringing all that in. Mm-hmm. And if they're not careful, they're going to get a lot of scrutiny. So I'm assuming that Judy, et cetera, they're smart enough to go, hey, that's great. We'll continue to win and we can be the platform, but we can't ever be seen anywhere as picking winners or losers or stopping organizations from doing things. Yeah, well, you would hope, right? You would hope. But and it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. To your point about inside of any health system, the EHR is the vortex that swallows up all the people resources, financial resources, and so on. A significant portion of it, right? Especially the IT budget. And by virtue of that, the health system doesn't progress
right, or doesn't advance, and healthcare doesn't advance because the innovation can't get through the door.
Yep.
Right. So that's not a good thing for the United States of America or the world, really.
I agree. I mean, eventually innovation will push through. Like it just will. I think the advancements of AI, I think, especially as they get generative AI, it's going to happen so fast. You can't put the genie back in the bottle and you can't control it.
Yeah.
It's just, and the rising generation of CIOs that are in their 30s and physicians and nurses that are younger. I just think their demand and then patient demand and consumer demand that's how the end around monoliths is going to happen.
Yeah.
Like just regardless of how they try to control it. So which obviously Oracle bought Cerner. Which kind of big Silicon Valley guy do you think people, organizations do you think actually be successful? I actually ran a poll on this. Maybe I'll pull it up.
Did you?
Yeah, maybe I'll pull it up. And
I don't know if I could figure out one.
yeah, I don't think there'll just be one.
Yeah, but
I have to figure out how to share.
I mean, Satya Nadella, I would love to see him jump in and shake it up. Microsoft has dabbled around this forever, really.
Yeah, they really have.
But
can you see my screen? I'll just pull up this poll.
Yep, I can see it.
All right. Yeah, so this is one I ran. Oh, I have to accept cookies. So this is one I ran on LinkedIn just on like a week ago. Pretty good response, 113, managers and execs, that kind of stuff. So my main thing was LinkedIn, unfortunately, lets you do 4 options, right? Maybe I should start using my platform, our research platform, to do this. But Microsoft, you're talking a pretty big chunk, man, 48% that are like, which I kind of makes sense, right? So hospitals have been using Microsoft tech forever, right? Exchange and
oh yeah, for sure.
And then they bought Nuance and that kind of stuff, and then they got cloud with Azure and that stuff. But what's interesting is
I wonder how much the OpenAI thing relative to Microsoft may have influenced the response rate.
I'm sure it did.
You think?
Yeah.
It would influence me if I was answering the survey.
Yeah. And I guess it's who it's coming from. So what's interesting is that the percentage of C-level, so C-suite, more of them chose Apple than anybody else. If you look at it, only 18% of them said Google, or 18% for C-suite. 29% for Microsoft, 36% for Amazon, higher, and then you go up to Apple, you're 44%, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of, kind of interesting.
Do you see Apple getting into the business? Or are they going to stay consumer?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I would love them to, actually.
So someone asked me this. So it's I think in the long term. So Microsoft's always going to be really successful, right? They already are. Like I don't see that not still being really successful in healthcare in some way, shape, or form. And I think mainly because of Nuance and because of OpenAI. Although I do think lots of other companies are going to catch up to OpenAI at the time. We get all crazy, right? Like anyone who comes out first and they have a lot of success, we just think our brains go, well, they're going to be the top dog forever. Yeah, almost never the case. As a matter of, I think Amazon is going to be successful just because I think over time they're going to figure out cloud really well, and they're dominant cloud in every industry. So I think they'll be around for sure in healthcare. Google, I don't. I think they'll be in life sciences, but I don't think in the provider space. I don't think anyone trusts them anymore because they've done that healthcare hokey pokey where the right foot's in, the right foot's out. They're just in and out. So back to Apple. So Apple is interesting, I think, from the fact, Greg, that there's going to be more consumers that use Apple products by far than have that use my chart.
Yeah.
It's certainly with regularity.
Sure.
It's not even close.
Sure.
It's probably like a factor of 20 that are 100 in terms of leveraging. So you're seeing people that are using the Apple Health Kit, right? They got their phone and their watch and they're tracking, and it's becoming better and better. Now it's blood pressure. So as you get, especially the rising generation, or even people that are just really obsessed with their fitness or their health, that are getting all their data, personal data, most of it, it's being captured themselves through their devices, Apple, and it's connected, right? And then Apple builds these kits that doctors can use to access and whatever it is. So the end around, and Apple, I don't think would ever do an EHR because they would never develop something so inelegant. I don't think they would ever tie their name to something that's so clunky, right? I mean, even the best EHRs are ambulatory stuff to use. If you compare it to anything that Apple or frankly Google or anyone else produces in other industries, it's laughable, right? The interfaces are just, they're just not good. So I think if you look at lots and lots of consumers, like tens of millions, hundreds of millions, that are getting all of their health data, their personal health data that they care about the most, unless they're a chronic disease patient, is on their Apple devices. Apple to me is the one that could do an end around and all of a sudden come out and they're like, hey, we got full cloud, we've got ridiculous amounts of data, we've got our own AI chip. Physicians now patients have 100% control of their own data. It's all stored securely, and people do trust Apple security, right? More than I think anybody else. They really trust Apple security. It's all there, and now we're giving super secure access to the physicians or nurses organizations I want, but I control it. The hospital does not get to control my data. We're going to come out with some sort of co-sharing arrangement with it. So I think Apple has the ability to come out with EHR 3.0, but I don't think it'll be anything recognizable, honestly. I think they certainly could, and it could be what they're doing. They're not going to tell anybody.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting.
We'll see.
In June, they're going to make some big AI announcement. So that'll be interesting to see. And I expect this, we all know how Siri works or doesn't work. I think, they're going to come out with something revolutionary. I'm hopeful.
Well, and Siri doesn't work because most people turn it off. They don't want it to record everything. Like use other AI that's conversational AI. Apple's always been like, turn it off. Like Siri could probably come a lot better. Everyone just said, no, it's always listening to me. And it's always picking up everything. But a lot of people have
the volume of data so they get better and better and better.
And most, I have it turned off. Like it only works if I want it to work at that time.
Right.
But I don't want Apple Maps tracking to make this. But if you use Google stuff, everything you used, forget about it, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot more accurate. So Apple has to dance that line on, we want to be known as the security company, but we want our AI to be a lot more accurate. Like, okay, that's probably the right path, but it's going to take you a lot longer.
Yeah.
To get there.
Yeah. And, I just, you were talking there, there's still this problem in healthcare where 30 to 40% of healthcare spend is waste. And having family members, with cancer and having to, spend time with oncologists and other types of providers and so on, it's still remarkable to me how much clinical variation there really is. And the EHR has done nothing to solve that problem. And I think
it's true.
It's a significant contributor to the state of healthcare and the rising cost of healthcare all the time, right? And why it's 20% of GDP is because there's a lot of waste in there. And so if you could take 30 to 40% of the waste out, or at least take 10% out, that's a big step forward. But I think having worked in that space for a long time, there's just always this undertone of, well, can't tell me how to practice medicine. And, some people may be listening, they really like, nah, that's not true. Well, it's absolutely true. And so I think.
Well, you've heard it and I've heard it. Like this isn't. These aren't anecdotes. These are
and
actual.
I've heard it for almost 40 years. It's
Yeah.
the same conversation going way back. And even back to when I was, tucked in nursing stations doing time and motion studies, I would see the variation and I would write it down. This guy does this, he uses this implant, it takes him this long to do it versus this guy or gal or whatever. Anyway, that was just something that prompted in my head. I think it's a fundamental thing that if we crack that nut and reduce the amount of waste in the healthcare system, that can have a very positive impact.
Well, don't you think that? I mean, think about what you're doing though. But that's where AI works. Like you said from the beginning, which I should have let you talk more on it rather than get distracted with your background. But people, they jump from AI comes out, it starts helping you write papers and starts helping you research things and whatever, right? And help you can create a quick little interface for something on your website. It's awesome. And people jump to, you had, I think it's Vinay at Colsa Ventures, whatever. Is like, oh, it's going to replace 80% of doctors. I mean, it's just some super hyperbolic stuff.
Sure.
I'm like, how did we go from this creating cool little videos and this kind of stuff to it's Skynet? Like, guys, and it's going to replace all doctors, like, or not all doctors, but the vast majority of what doctors and nurses do, AI can do. I'm like, maybe in like 40 years or something, but then it would just be still doctors are still there, but they're doing more specialized things. Like, it's kind of bananas. And it's getting to your point earlier, the real tangible benefits that can come out from AI and automation get lost in the fear, the hyperbolic fear, or the hyperbolic, like this is going to revolutionize the world like right away. No, it's awesome. Right. Yeah. So talk more about that and the low hanging fruit, where it's really helping.
Well, let's just take what we do, for example, right? When you think about what is the job of clinical data abstraction, they're trying to collect data, really high quality data, to feed the registries, to then use the analytics to drive, quality and process improvement. Noble cause, awesome.
Yeah.
When you look at how chart abstraction is done today, 99.9% of it, it's what we would call swivel chair integration, meaning that you have a nurse, you have a PA, you have an NP, you have a doc even that needs to do abstraction. And on this screen over here, they've got Epic or Cerner or whatever the EHR is, and they're poking around, hunting in there to try to figure out where the data is. And then they literally turn their chair to this screen. Once they figure out the answer to one of the registry questions, they then enter the data into this screen. So it's swivel chair integration. Crazy, right? And there's still a ton of paper data collection forms out there, believe it or not. So, and when you think about that 80% of the data, roughly 80% of the data in an EHR is unstructured notes. Well, guess what? That's a perfect application for an LLM. And so, the pace of innovation, something that we've seen just in the last month with just continuous new releases of models that are out there. And so what we found really interesting actually is so let's just say you've got a stroke registry, you've got a cardiovascular registry, two different things, different questions, different data requirements, all that kind of stuff. And what we found is like, we can dynamically plug in different models and see what the results are, see which model is actually more accurate than the other models. And even the models, like you can use Haiku or Sonnet for cardiovascular, but if you apply it to stroke, it's the wrong model, that kind of thing. And so you can, being able to swap them in and out is super, super valuable. So we do a lot of testing around that kind of stuff because accuracy in abstraction is like paramount, the number one thing you need to be able to do. And so when you look at just the effort, right? So if you think about swivel chair integration, it takes on average a skilled abstractor, depending upon the type of patient and how long the registry form is, but it can take 1 to 2 hours per case to manually do it. When you apply AI to it, to large volumes of data, it can extract, what we found in our tests with our clients is we can automatically fill in 50 to 70% of the data requirements using AI like that, right?
Dude.
Huge, like this. So you think about it, you think about the state of healthcare, labor shortages, super high cost, wages escalating, and you got people doing this and you got people doing this. What's remarkable is when you talk to C-suite executives in health system and you explain this, and you we can even commit to 30 to 40% cost savings. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you? Well, I can tell you what happens a lot of the time is the health system exec says, well, what am I going to do with all my people? What am I going to do with all my people? And which I would tell them, which I do tell them, is instead of your nurses and your docs and your MPs and your PAs entering data, some people love that part of the job. The vast majority don't. And so instead of them entering data, what if they were actually using the registry output to actually do improvement projects? That's what they should be doing. That's what they're trained to do. And so you just you feel, you almost feel stymied sometimes because in their mind, the cost of change is too much of a cost of change. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. No.
So
yeah,
and those
100%.
are the types of things that limit innovation.
Well, and the other thing too is there's a staff shortage.
Right. It is not going away.
So yeah, you have a kind of a perfect storm happening. You look at the demographic shift. People aren't getting healthier.
No.
Like they're just not. Even if people aren't in the elderly, and you're getting a place where they start sucking up more healthcare, percentage wise by far than any other group. So en masse, from little kids up to the elderly, we're not getting healthier as a society. We should, but we're not, right? And I'll get into. But I just did a call with a buddy of mine, podcast that released earlier in the week of Pete Nanos, and he gets into semaglutide, GLP-1s, and diet, exercise, and all this other kind of stuff. Anyway, I don't want to get us distracted there because I'll definitely riff and offend the world with. But so you have the demographics are not in healthcare services. Needs to increase, and you get older population, all kind of stuff. But then you look on the other side, there are less and less people who want jobs in healthcare because it is stressful. Look at nursing school enrollments, look at medical school enrollments, look at anything. Like, it doesn't matter. People coming in to be coders and respiratory techs and radiology techs and lab techs or whatever it is. There's no place where they say we just have way too many good people.
Yeah,
I don't know organization yet. So the whole point is that's that short-term mindset of I don't want to have to. It's too painful to shift to think about something else. Say, well, it's fine. You can be proactive and be the agent and actor in the organization's future, or you can just be reactive and end up like Steward Health or something like that. I mean, you
right.
Doesn't have to be both, one or the other, but that's, to me, the promise of AI is that it isn't about replacing people. It's your labor shortage is decreasing. Your labor pool is decreasing, right, and the quality of the labor pool is decreasing.
Right.
But the amount of care you're having to do is increasing. Like, AI is going to help you actually stay on top of it.
Right. Absolutely. And, when you have an industry that has razor thin margins, and, big health systems that have never lost money ever, and they are, if I was the CEO of any one of those organizations, I would be looking for any competitive advantage I could get out of technology. Right? I think one of the latest stats I heard is there's not enough people in nursing school today to fill all the vacancies that are out there in the industry. So you're never going to catch up. And so, and we could draw parallels to lots of other industries where they technology was applied, made them a lot more efficient, all that kind of stuff. But in healthcare, we tend to, I think we tend to be super conservative under the umbrella of it's patient care, it's medicine. And there's some truth to that. But
so what? I'm sorry, man. Yeah, so what?
I'm with you. Right? I think we hide behind that.
Think about how much they push it back against anything. I think what's laughable is people say evidence-based medicine. Like, here's an industry that of in any industry out there outside of maybe, I don't know, space, like where if you screw up, it's death at every point, right? But it's kind of similar that way. An industry that should be on the lookout for new innovations and new evidence, and once it's proven, to act on it. But you don't see that in healthcare. You see a constant reticence. Like, it is the most conservative. If it was political, it would be the reddest of the reddest state ever. Like, not wanting to change anything. Will literally kicking and screaming, even when you have other organizations and you can, like you've shown, and it's not just you, have so many other people that I know, and they're like, we're going in and we can actually show them. We'll go at risk.
Yeah.
And they won't do it. And you just walk away. And then you'll hear that same executive, I'll see him at some conference or making a comment about how their, healthcare needs to change, innovate. And you're like, you lying son of a gun. Like, I just was in that meeting with you, and you shot down anything new that came up, but then you get up on stage and you got all the talking points.
Isn't that, it's a really interesting study in psychology. Everybody knows healthcare needs a change. We all know it's way too expensive, and so on. And yet, at the ground level, we don't do the things that can have big impacts very quickly. I've seen this throughout my entire career. So it's surprising. But I think there's a psychology here that I haven't cracked. You and I sit on the outside. We're not in the care delivery business, but we're in the care facilitation business, I would say, through technology. And I think, just a really interesting study in psychology. And I'm sure somebody would.
Yeah, there's something about, I'd have to go back and look at, because right or wrong, healthcare at the core takes its cues from clinicians, mainly physicians, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd have to go look for it. And again, this is just my crazy mind thinking. Like, what are they taught in medical school, right? And because there's so many companies that have been in healthcare that have done some really cool stuff that hasn't been successful. And there's so little true appetite. And I don't mean on the surface, but true appetite to change. There's very little appetite to change in healthcare. And maybe it's a safety thing where let's say, hey, we'd rather, almost like the industry, we'd rather like in the legal space, rather have 99 guilty people go free than we put one innocent person in prison. Now, our legal system doesn't do that, let's be honest. Right. But it's that mindset. So it's almost like in healthcare, until we're 100% sure, we just don't want to do anything. It's better. It's way better to be safe than sorry, even when it becomes obvious. And so that kind of culture permeates everything. And so it permeates the rest of the organization. It permeates the other peers. It permeates the companies that try to serve them, right? Like you guys, you end up, you're basically in the orbit. You can't just do your own thing. You're like, we have to adjust and adapt to the people that we're in the organizations are trying to sell to. So I think even the best vendors, and we're in healthcare, we kind of bend to the dysfunction of the healthcare organizations, because you can't just say, I think that's kind of what Google and others done. They said, this is just silly. Like, do it this way. It's crazy. And then they leave and they come back in, because it does on the surface. It doesn't make sense. They look at it like, yeah, we're not clinicians, but I can see you have a lot of data problems. And if you did this, and they just fight against it. And I think there's just their brain glitches from the outside. Companies that come in, they glitch and like this, because from a logical perspective, a lot of the hesitancy and reticence to just no brainer, we should be putting card in, et cetera. It doesn't make any sense until you've been bathed in, you've simmered in the juices of healthcare for long enough to know, no, that's not a bug, it's a feature.
It's a feature, yeah, exactly. I think when I go to meetings like Chime as an example, what I have sort of two reactions. One, where are all my friends? They're retired, and sort of that I'm not going to say the old guard, but the established CIOs,
the OGs,
the OGs, yeah, the OG CIOs,
yeah,
and you're starting to see more and more younger people roll into those positions of CDO, CIO, chief innovation officer, and so on, and a lot are coming from other industries. So from that perspective, I'm hopeful that they're going to bring, and they can actually say, well, no, I did this over here. Why wouldn't we do this here? Okay, that kind of thing. I'm hopeful that in the next 10 years, we have some significant advances with people that are more of a modern era, I guess.
So you brought up something that I actually kind of posted about this yesterday. I'm like, where's the Venn diagram of overlap of a CIO to a chief digital officer to a CCHIO, which I don't even know what that is exactly, to a chief AI officer to a CMIO. So I'm
yeah.
Like, so who does what? And I actually was talking to an organization, a CIO at another hospital, no, a CMIO of a hospital, big health system earlier in the week, and he asked me that question. I'm like, I don't know. Like, you're inside a health system. He's like, yeah, I left another health system where they came in and they put all these titles in. We were stepping on each other's toes so much, and like, who's the single person deciding what's actually to happen? So I'll ask you, like,
well, and what is digital? What does digital mean? Let's start there. I think my like many things in healthcare, I would say it depends. It depends on the organization, community. Like I have a very good friend who was he was CIO, then chief digital officer for a 10 hospital system, and he just knowing him, and I spent a lot of time with him as a customer and so on. He was very strategic. He's CIO because there's not another CIO, but he's very strategic in sort of growth of the organization overall. And he's very forward thinking, pays a lot of attention to what other industries are doing, especially from a patient experience perspective. But then you have others that are, they're CIOs, and their real responsibility is making sure the lights stay on relative to Epic. Epic enhancements.
So they're more like CTOs.
Kinda. And then that type of organization brings in a CDO or a chief innovation officer. But to your point, like
there's another one, chief innovation officer.
Right. And sometimes the chief innovation officer is also the CIO. So it really
so is digital, because when I just look at what people talk about. So chief digital officers I'm connected to, or I see on LinkedIn, they post stuff. It's normally around things dealing directly with the patient.
I would agree. Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So then if they have a patient experience officer, I'm worried there's too much bloat. I'm worried there's too much like executive bloat. You're like, hang on a second. That's fine. Okay. There's all these exist, but then is CIO their boss?
Yeah. I don't know. It depends.
Some isn't. I talked to an organization, the chief strategy officer is over all of it now.
Oh, really?
Okay. Well, it's just, boy, it's healthcare. We love bureaucracy, don't we? Love it.
We do. Yeah. Layer upon layer of it, for sure. But, I think going back to how we got started this conversation, I'm still and thinking about things like AI and, where people are relative to, on the fear spectrum, and then where are they on the FOMO spectrum? And at some point they intersect. And when they do, I think you'll see a rapid adoption. I think people are still hovering around what the right use case is. And one of the things that used to annoy me a lot is when you would see some company say, and you listen to Jim Cramer on CNBC, and we talk about any company as an AI.
I do the short Cramer. ETF.
But it's like that's a cloud company, that's an AI company. And the way that I've always thought about it is like with AI in particular, nobody's an AI company. Maybe OpenAI is an AI company, but if you're not pointing that AI gun towards solving a very specific problem, so you really, we're a clinical data abstraction company that happens to use AI to do the job faster, better, cheaper. That's the story. It's not about, I get this crazy new algorithm. There's going to be tons of algorithms, public and private, right? So it's
Exactly.
I think we're just in this, sausage making phase.
You see that?
Yeah.
Man, I love it because we have some AI guys that work for us, and so we have some customers talk about AI, like, hey guys, you're going to put AI in your research platform, which makes sense, right?
Right.
And we say yes, but people are like, oh, you're becoming an AI company. I said, well, no. What is AI? Is AI not software?
Yeah, it's math.
I said it is. I said, so I think one of the problems people make is in healthcare is they start talking about AI. And what happens is most of the executives, I'm sure that you work with, they don't know what AI is at a hospital. They don't know. And so, and when there's a level of ignorance in it, like you said, there's FOMO and there's fear, but there's also means they're not going to act. So I'd say, stop talking about AI. Your whole thing is if they bring up AI, say, oh yeah, we got some really awesome algorithms, et cetera, but allow them to bring it up. Then you're not going to get distracted and you're not going to introduce fear and ignorance or trigger their ignorance trigger, so to speak, about it, because really it's better software.
Right.
So just say we're automating. And so I tell people, maybe talk about how you're automating things, you're super streamlining processes, you're improving, et cetera. If you start throwing around AI and, oh man, we're JSON backend and blah, blah, who knows what, I'm not sure that's going to help. I think it's going to serve more of a distraction than anything else.
And when you think about the problems in healthcare, right? Every health system has the same problems and the same things they're trying to solve for, right? If you're the CEO of a health system, you want to know how can I make more money? How can I save money? And how do I keep quality, regulatory compliance, things like that. And so if you come into an organization, you're talking about your speeds and feeds and all that, and your back end architecture and all this sort of stuff, that's a snoozer. But if you're focused on solving very acute business problems or clinical problems, it doesn't matter if you have the proof. It doesn't matter what the technology is in the back end, right? If it happens to be AI, great. But I think we got to keep focused and be relentless on solving for the big key business challenges, which are the same as they ever were.
I know. So anything we haven't covered that we should cover, any parting shots, man, we should end with?
Oh, I don't know.
We could talk Fury Road.
Nothing jumps to mind. Nothing. I mean, I think we covered the hot topics of the day. I do want the industry to get over ourselves about technology.
Good luck with that.
I know. I'm the eternal optimist. Drive my wife crazy. I can find a silver lining in anything. But I'm hopeful.
Oh, I think we will. I think generative AI is a game changer from a cultural perspective. You can't put that, as we talked about earlier, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. And it's going to impact. And no matter what a CIO, et cetera, tries to do, you can't keep it out. Just remember back when they try to keep smartphones out, try to keep iPhones out of
hospitals,
the hospital?
Yeah.
Couldn't, no matter what you did. It's the same thing here. You can't keep it. And organizations, as they start adopting super organically a lot of these AI tools, applications, et cetera, that just have, doctors love them, nurses love them, patients love it. Doesn't matter who it is, abstractors, coders, whatever. You can't keep it out. You can't keep it lit on.
I agree.
Then you're gonna have to say, we're adopting all this new stuff. And then they start looking at, well, how can we justify now this mega spend? They're going to go back and say, it isn't worth it. We're only using X. These other systems are generating huge ROI, huge physician satisfaction, nurse satisfaction, patient satisfaction. If you want to stick around here, you're going to take a 50% haircut or whatever.
Right.
I think that's how it happens.
Yeah. I think the next 18, 24 months are going to be really exciting.
We'll be here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing another one of these.
Yeah, man, for sure. We'll have to talk later in the year when there's some more progress. Anyway, I'm going to put a link to your bio on LinkedIn in the description on the podcast. I'll put Carta Healthcare as well down there. And then you just let me know if there's anything else you want to put in. I don't know if you're on Twitter or Instagram.
No, we're not really using any of that.
You throwing up backflips, backcountry skiing or whatever. We put links to that. YouTube, whatever.